Hi, everybody. This is Gary Douglas. And
hi, it's Steve Bowman here.
And Chatisa.
And we are here to talk about benevolent capitalism. So I'd like to thank you all for joining us. This is second to last of our broadcasts, as we have done them, the freebies. But if you guys have an interest in doing some more of this, what are we going to charge? Are we going to charge? What do we want to do? I forget what we decided or thought. You?
We'll do that next thing.
We haven't made any.
We haven't decided. Okay, 3-day class next year, someplace. Okay, good. So there you go. We are really with it today. I'm not with it at all. It's like I just, flew in a couple of days ago from Mumbai, 20 hours on Emirates first class. Oh my God, I love it. At any rate, I am addicted to Emirates first class. I could just live on that plane. If I didn't ever have to get off, and I could eat caviar every day, all day, and all that kind of stuff, it was great. And this is not a paid political advertising for Emirates. But at any rate, I know, Chatisa liked Emirates too. It was really good for you, wasn't it?
I love Emirates. We flew here to New Zealand on Emirates for 3 hours, and we really had a nice time for 3 hours, so that was good.
I just love the global nature of this hangout. Here we have someone who lives in Texas, who's flown from Mumbai, who's currently in Australia. And then on the other end, you've got two Australians who live in Australia but are currently in New Zealand working.
And haven't been home for the past 2.5 months.
I've been home for 2.5 months? Oh my goodness.
Oh, we've
I
been home for 2
it's
days before we
been
came
that long. Cool.
So,
well,
okay, so today's Google Hangout.
So let's talk about benevolent capitalism. So one of the things Chatisa sent me a few days ago, everybody, was the three not faults. What are they? The three-way traps.
3 key traps that businesses fall into.
Cool. So let's talk about those 3 traps. What are the 3 traps? Let's start with one of them. Number one.
Yeah. Number one is where they what's called the awareness or the mindset trap. It's where they fixate on what made them in the past. So they're living in past glory. They're living based on what they've done in the past, and therefore the future will be exactly the same as the past, so we have nothing to worry about. And because they were successful in the past, they think that is future evidence that they'll be successful into the future, and they just stop any looking at what the potential for the future might be and only look at it through the filter of what was successful in the past.
And they refuse to receive the fact and information about what other possibilities that are coming on, like Kodak, that refusing to see digital, that stop them from...
I just saw an article the other day that indicated that 8 years before digital cameras became popular, Kodak created one. And they shut it down because they figured film would always be there.
Yes, it's amazing.
Yeah, and they actually created one.
Yeah. We see this quite a bit in organizations. Yeah, in organizations that we work with, we see this a fair bit too, where they've been so successful in the past that they assume that that will always continue on, and they're never looking to see what else is possible. It's always been, well, it's almost like we're too successful, we cannot not succeed.
Yeah, and that's actually you know what, that's funny, because that's a headset I see a lot of people have. And I remember in the 60s, I met a man who had a car dealership, and he'd been really successful, and then he borrowed a ton of money, and he became unsuccessful because there was a downturn in the economy, and people weren't buying cars as much. And he said, I borrowed as much money as I could so that the banks would not be able to let me fail.
Yeah.
Because they would lose too much from it. And that's a point of view that occurs out there too.
Still has
strange. really amazing. And so it's like this whole thing of getting fixated on the headset that you have about what has created success. And it's like if you are always looking to the past, you can't actually create the future. And I know in my business, what I do with it every day is I destroy and create everything it was yesterday, so that I'm always looking to create more today and create from a different way. And it's like if businesses just did that, okay, what can we destroy? Can we destroy and then create everything we were yesterday, and be on the creative edge of what is actually possible? A whole different universe can open up.
Well, it's interesting when you start to look at it from the typical organisational viewpoint. A lot of budget setting, for example, when they sit down and set budgets, they look at the last 3 years and try and extrapolate what those successes might look like in the next year, without actually sitting down and say, well, what do we actually want to create? So too many organisations are fixated on their mindset of, well, we just have to continue to keep the things going that have always been going and not look at what else is possible. That's what a budget sets in concrete.
I wonder if that's actually not the place when they try to create the budget and they try to create from what they did in the past, if that's not the fixed point of view that's really the killer, because they've gone out of create into recreate.
Yeah, that's very true. And in fact, a lot of the problems that boards run into is they are only focused on whether or not we're meeting the targets that we'd set based on past experience, rather than what else is possible, what's the innovation, what else is required. And so they become a compliance organisation rather than a generative organisation.
Well, are they fixated or are they obsessed with what the result should be instead of receiving what it could be? If they're fixated on what the result should be, they would just go after something that might not be feasible anymore.
Well, it was interesting because I did a telecall this morning. It was one of the teleseries I do, and I was doing a bunch of processing. And one of the processes that came up is, what have you made so violently vital about the zealotry of the past? And it's like when we fixate on the past, we become zealots about the past being the source that keeps us from living in the present and creating a future. And it's like,
that's
and literally,
exactly what we're talking about.
Yes. I saw the TV show a few days ago that this guy in Denver or something who got awarded for the best pizza in Denver in 1986. And now no one's going into his restaurant, but he's still saying that he has the best pizza. But it was in 1986, so he's still celebrating his success from 1986 and not willing to change his menu to what people are wanting to eat now. And he couldn't work out why people don't want to come to his restaurant, because he still thinks he's the best because he got that award.
Yeah, and the thing is, you always go to the past for the point where you were the best at something. I know years ago I had a lady I was working with her, and she talked about the best sex she ever had was when she was 16. I said, 16 was the best sex you ever had? She goes, yes. I go, you're in your 50s now. That's the best sex you ever had was 16? What have you been doing? What do you mean? Nothing. And she goes, well, it's like I had the best sex, so I don't have to go find any better sex. I went, you know what? That's why you aren't having better sex, because you're not looking for better than you had then. You're looking for that having been the best. And that's what I see businesses doing all the time. This was the best year we ever had, so they try to create another one of those years instead of how does it get any better than this and what else is possible we haven't considered.
So whenever we say that we are the best of something, we need to catch ourselves and look at where's the fixed point of view, or where have we collapsed the possibility. Whenever we say best of anything, we shut down, don't we? Totally.
Yeah. It's like I've watched people go, well, this is the best buy I ever got on an antique, or this is the best buy I ever got in a dress. And it's like I know a lady who wore the same dress for 10 years because it was the best buy she ever got. Of course, in 10 years, how fashionable was it? It wasn't. And Oh
Wasn't
yeah,
the
and
same
then
lady, was it?
what's that?
Wasn't the same lady, was it? As the
No, wasn't the
six of
same.
16?
So
No,
Gary, if the person think that they are doing something amazing and wonderful, what would it take then for them to actually be grateful or celebrate what they are creating and generating in that moment, and not being trapped into not creating any other possibilities?
well, from my point of view, what you have to look at is, okay, this is the best I've created so far. What could I create that would be greater than this? What is possible that I haven't considered? What is greater that, nobody else can see? And it's like when I do something that's really good, I go, okay, so how does it get any better than this? Because my basic point of view is I need to be doing greater today than I did yesterday. Everything needs to be greater today than it was yesterday. Not I succeeded, so therefore that's it. I know with Access, it's like everything in Access changes every 10 seconds, basically. Just like the call this morning where I got the zealotry people have about the past, which keeps them from living in the present and creating a future. And one of the things I noticed is that one of my kids had done this thing of, because of a past decision, she had put her life on hold waiting for something. And my basic point of view is never wait, always create. And she had put her life on hold based on somebody else. And it's like, and by putting her life on hold for somebody else, she wasn't creating her life, and therefore she was having problems, renting a house. She was having problems with, getting her car taken care of. She was having problems, quote unquote, but all of them were based on having decided that one decision was bad. And it's like, and that's another thing I see businesses do. They do this thing of, I made a bad decision, so therefore I can't create. No, you got to create regardless of what decisions you've made. And that's a big element of it.
So the first trap that we found companies fall into is this awareness and mindset trap. The second one, which is really interesting, is what you could call the physical trap. It's where they've invested big in old systems, and because they've invested so much in what they've already got, they're not willing to look to see what else, and so they try and fix what already is rather than create new. And probably
Well,
the
it's like,
best example of that is GMH, General Motors Holden. Because what they did is they invested in a whole range of very large cars, and their whole production facility was based on large cars. So when the market started to move towards small cars, they made the small cars, but they weren't really interested in them, so they made them really shoddily because they wanted to sell the things that they'd already put their money into, which were the big cars. And that just didn't work out too well for them.
But isn't that the same, Gary,
no,
when you talk about one of your children, that is that the physical trap, that she made a decision of something and she's make it on hold because the physical trap that she's created? Is that the same thing, you think?
yes, it's exactly the same thing. That's exactly the same thing. You are correct. Because it's like when we take these points of view about what should be or what has to be, it's like we don't actually create what's possible. And it's with Holden, they made, like you said, they decided big cars were it. Well, big cars are fine if you're in America, okay? In America, they like big cars, they like gas guzzlers, they don't really care. And it's like, I have one of those, or actually I have two of those. And I think it's very funny that people, like little cars, because I find little cars irritating. But that's me. And it's like we all have to look from what works for us, not what works for others. And that's a really important aspect of how anything's going to work in our lives. We need to be aware. And that the thing with Holden, had they been willing to follow the times, it's like, and it's like, and I don't even like that word times, but if they had been willing to look at what the market was doing, it's like, I think it's interesting that we have all these, electric cars, half electric cars stuff happening, and a whole lot of that was promoted on the basis that it was ecologically superior, but in actuality, the toxic waste from electric cars is greater than the toxic waste from gas guzzling cars. So it's like, better. What we really need to do is look from a totally different point of view. And the car company that actually looks from a totally different point of view and starts looking for an alternative energy source will be the one that succeeds in the future.
It's interesting because
So,
we find it in our own business sometimes, and certainly in many other businesses, where because we've invested in developing something in the past, we continue on with it, probably well past the stage where we should have moved on, and we just continue doing the same thing over and over because it did work in the past, and we were invested in the time and the effort of getting that system right without looking at, well, what else is possible? That was great. What else?
and what's going to create the most for the future. And that's one of the reasons I always give the people the question, okay, if I choose this, what will my life be like in 25 years? And if you look at that from your business point of view, major changes. I know it's like I looked at our website stuff, and we had the back end of our website wasn't accomplishing everything that we needed done. And a whole lot of what we do, quote unquote, could actually be done really easily by computers if we had the technology set up for that. Well, we didn't have that. Why didn't we have it? Well, we didn't have it because we didn't have it, and we kept trying to fix what we already had, thinking that we could manage. And it's like that's the thing where I wasn't investing in the future correctly. So we got some people who were going to supposedly do what we wanted, and they couldn't do it. And we invested $125,000 in that to get no result. Then we went, okay, we got to do this a different way, and we tried to find people who could do it for us. We weren't terribly successful. We finally found somebody who was going to do it for us, and they set things in motion and started creating the stuff. But it stopped at some point, and I could feel it energetically having stopped, and I didn't know what it was. So we found an IT guy that's really brilliant, and I started using him to test our new system. And he's found some flaws, so we will probably have to reconstruct about half of what we've already done. We've already done $250,000 worth of work to get to this half that we have. But it's given us a clarity, and that's really what you want, clarity. You know, $250,000 investment is a lot. But it's like I wasn't willing to invest more in it with the idea that we would have to create from the cope and chaos of it. And it's like I don't know how many people you've seen, but I've seen a whole lot of people who do cope and chaos, and they cope with the chaos, and they consider that creation. I don't consider it creation. You see that in businesses you deal with?
Yeah, you often find the chaos where people feel that when they're in a complex situation, it's in a chaotic situation, and they really don't have any clarity about what needs to change and where they need to go, but they just sort of muddle on. And it's very tempting to go back into the past in that situation and just focus on what was successful in the past, so you don't actually have to deal with the chaos or what many people think is chaos is in fact change. And because so many people have got such a negative view of what change is, they misidentify it as chaos.
Good point. That's brilliant. Yeah. And it's like, and the other part of it is, you know, the chaos, coping with chaos. If you have, I can cope with chaos and I can handle it. What you're always doing is solving the problem that you create by the chaos. And one of the things I noticed is one of the people that's working for me has always been great at coping with chaos. And so the system that got created was far more complex than it needed to be in order to create the coping with chaos reality.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So Gary, for most business, with the story you just told about your website, for most business, if they already invested $250,000 into the website, they would try so hard to make it work, even though it's not going to work, but they're not going to get rid of it. So what advice do you give to company that invested a lot of money into it already and know it's not going to work, but the guilt and the point of view wouldn't allow them to say, okay,
the fear
it's over.
The fear of waste.
Yes. Not wanting to.
Fear of waste. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, but the thing is, it's like you got to realize it's like you have a choice. You can either waste what doesn't work, or you can waste your time trying to fix what doesn't work. And that's really, it's like, how much is that time and energy worth to try and keep something working that doesn't work? And I see that all the time with people. They do the same thing over and over again, thinking they're going to get a different result, which is, oh yeah, that's what they call insanity. And
True.
it's, it's like it's this weird thing that people think that if they cope with what's going on, they will eventually get it figured out. But that's a mistake. And it's like, from my point of view, it's like when something isn't working, okay, destroy it utterly and move on. Because it's like, if it isn't going to work, go away. I know it's like in my horse business, I had a trainer that I had hired to work with my horses. And I had a person that was, that owned the property that they were stabled on, and they hated each other. And they wouldn't get along, and it was always the other person's fault, and they both complained to me, but neither one would change anything. So I said, you know what, you guys, I'm going to be gone for a month. When I get back, if you haven't figured out how to get along with one another, I am going to kill all my horses and put them in a freezer and use them for barbecue. They went, you're not going to do that. You wouldn't do that. I said, yes, I would. I will. You have no idea. You don't know me. You think I'm going to sit here and, eat crap because you don't want to get along with each other and have to deal with your unhappiness? No, no, no. I'll put them to, it's like I will butcher them and use them as meat. I will have horse meat, which is, by the way, there are countries that eat horse meat, and it's really quite nice. It's kind of lean and good for you. So it's like, but here, they'll keep a horse alive forever for no reason. In the United States, they keep horses alive for, lawn ornaments, when in actuality, if they would butcher them so that they could create something greater, it would be helpful. They should, but they don't.
And knowing you, if that's the case that you have to do, you probably create something even greater. You probably invented the new barbecue specialty that will take the world by storm with the horse meat.
Yeah, if I'm going to barbecue horse meat, I'm going to, try and sell it off to my friends at the very least, or give it to them, one of the two, create a new market. But that's
Can we just reflect on? Can we just reflect on that a bit too? Because I find this
on the barbecue.
No, I find this when we're talking to a lot of executives or people that are in business. I mean, a lot of people would be shocked at what you just said, because they don't realise that it's the willingness to do something that's the most important thing. Whether you do it or not is irrelevant, but it's the willingness, the absolute willingness to do something that is the energy that others will pick up on. And if they know that you are willing to do this, they are then willing to change. And
funny how that works.
Really, it's the willingness to, and the actual belief that you would do this. Whether you do it or not is less relevant.
Yeah. Well, it's like, the thing is, when you make the demand of yourself that you actually change something, the possibility for what you can change becomes greater, not less. And people have this weird point of view that they have to do the least amount, not the most amount. My point of view is, what can I do that would create the most here? That, it's like, if I did that, what else would be possible? What else could I create or generate that I haven't considered?
This physical trap actually remind me of how it actually applied to marriage as well. How marriage actually failed. I just heard someone that only been married for 6 months, but now wanting to get a divorce because they didn't want to cancel the wedding, because they had everything planned. So they went and got married anyway, and she knew from the start that's not going to last. But she was not willing to say, hey, let's stop it. So now after 6 months, they're going to
get a divorce.
Have a divorce. So crazy. That's a physical trap, isn't it? Not wanting to waste the money that, the deposit for the...
Or waste the planning, which is not even money, just the...
Hey, I knew a lady who had been married for 16 years, and her husband divorced her. And I asked, it's like, and I couldn't get anything to clear for her. I couldn't make anything better with her. And I finally said, so when did you leave the marriage? And it's like she got this strange look on her face. And I said, so was it before you got married or after? And she goes, before. So 6 months before she got married, she knew the marriage wasn't going to work for her. But instead of, not doing it, I said, so why did you get married if you knew it wasn't going to work? Well, we'd already sent out the invitations. I said, so for $450 worth of invitations, you would suffer for 16 years? And she did. She suffered for 16 years. And then when he left her, she was supposedly devastated. It's like, you shouldn't be devastated. You should be dancing on that boy's grave and having a good time. But that's my point.
How many people?
So we've been talking about these three traps that businesses fall into that cause them to go into decline. We said the first one is the mindset trap, where you're fixated on what was successful and try to recreate. The second one we're talking about is a physical trap, where you've already invested in systems or processes or something, and you're not willing to change those because of your feel that you've got that investment. The third one, which is really interesting, which is what we call the strategic trap, and that's where you're focused on just the marketplace of today rather than what might be into the future, but focusing on the marketplace of today you call strategic, so therefore it must be okay.
And not creating the future, just creating for today, not for the future.
Yeah, so it's like you had an example of a business that did that. Which one was that?
Well, that was another example of General Motors Holden, okay, because GMH actually fit all three of those criteria. And so GMH, for example, they focused on their market of today, which was big gas guzzlers, even though they knew the government had put in place taxation rules that helped people buy smaller cars. But they refused to look at the marketplace of the future, rather than looking to see, well, what can we start to now create for the future using what we've already really good at, which is producing high quality cars. So they started producing really shitty small cars so that people would buy their big ones.
But same as Kodak, HMV, and Blockbuster, all four of them actually have all the three traps because they're not willing to look at the future. They're just willing to look at the here and now.
So, and the interesting thing with companies is that
I'm not sure that they're looking at the here and now. I think they're looking at the past.
Yeah.
Okay. So they create the now from the past. They're not creating for the future. They're still creating the now for the from the past, and refusing to see what else is possible, and refusing to create the future, hoping that if they keep maintaining the now, everything will be okay.
So Gary, given all these things, the real crux of this Google Hangout is, what creates that, Gary? What is it that companies actually do that actually enable them to fall into those traps?
Well, from my point of view, it's like what happens is there's this thing that I call the collapse zone. I first found this with animals. It's like when like I was working with a horse that had been ridden by somebody who was highly fearful. So because the person was fearful, and horses communicate telepathically, the horse was looking for what he needed to fear. They got in an accident, the person got hurt, and the horse just collapsed his zone and went, oh my God, I'm terrible, I'm bad, I don't know what I'm doing. And so he collapsed his zone. And it's like like with horses, they have to have a zone of awareness. Because they are prey, they have to have a zone of awareness in order to know how to keep from getting eaten. Now, predators have to have a zone of awareness to know where the prey is that is willing to be eaten. Because basically, the way nature pretty much works is the prey are the weak of the species, because that's what keeps the species strong. And so they're willing to look for the weak. So each prey or predator has a zone of awareness. When people get in business, what I see them doing is they collapse their zone of awareness to what has, it's like with the mindset, it's like, okay, this is what's going to work. That's the conclusion. They shrink their zone based on, well, it's like, this is just the way it is, and that's the way it should be. And then you have the, the final one, which is the, the third element, which was what? Oh yeah, I forget.
What, the strategic?
The strategic, where see
No.
we're planning for the future. And
Yeah.
it's like, and planning is not the same as living and creating a future. You got to not plan for the future, but live and create a future. And it's like, and I think if business changed their point of view and started looking for living and creating a future, they'd actually start to expand their zone. And you have to look at where your zone of awareness is. One of the things is like, it's like Access is now in 131 countries, because we're always looking at how else can we expand, where else can we be, where else can we go, what else is possible. And in so doing, we're always expanding our zone of awareness, because awareness is the thing that makes the difference between success and failure, awareness. And it's like when I got an email from a lady today who went to South Africa, and she had very small classes, but she said, it's so weird, I think I should be freaked about the fact that these classes are so small, but I feel like it's creating so much that it doesn't matter. Now, in business, you would call that a loss leader. That's a loss leader, where you are willing to lose money on this thing in order to create something for the future. And that's a whole different universe, and that's actually creating the future, realizing that what you're doing today is creating a future. And it may not be profitable in this instant, but when will it be profitable? Because it will be profitable at some point as long as you continue. It's like one of my favorite things to say is never give up, never give in, and never quit. It's like, the thing is, you always quit, but never, give up is not changing. You always change, because whatever you can change is what's going to create greater possibilities. So everything has to be about looking for what you can create and what you can change, not about what can be the same.
So how do you know when you've started to collapse your zone of awareness? And just as importantly, how do you recognize it when others around you are starting to collapse their zone of awareness?
Well, it's like, when you've collapsed your zone of awareness when you do one of those three things. When you fixate on a point of view, when you, decide you got it right, or lose money. When you don't want to lose money, you collapse your zone. Okay, because it's like, it's not really possible to lose money if you're creating a future. You cannot make money and still create a future, but you're not really going to lose money if you're creating a future. That's a point of view most people don't have, but it's a point of view that you need to have if you really want to be successful in your business.
I've just got something. So those who say they are risk averse are just collapsing their zone of awareness dynamically, because they're not willing to look at potential or possibility, and they call it, I'm just risk averse.
Yes, which is justification. And that's the other element of this whole thing. It's about what you justify. Why you justify your choices. You only justify choices when you know you're choosing something you shouldn't.
Ouch.
Ouch. Sorry.
So are you saying that anywhere that we function from conclusion, judgment, and because the justification, we begin to collapse our zone?
Yes. So right now, just take your business and let's go, it's like, let's go 100,000 miles outside your business in all directions and expand your zone in all directions. Expand your zone to fit that. Everything doesn't allow that. We just run and grade it all, please. Thanks.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Now,
because that all of a sudden you start to have a different perspective on what's possible rather than focusing on what you think you already know. I like it. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's also a way that you get out of, oh, well, I have done this right, so now I need to do more of this. And that's another thing that we're taught in business, that when you have a success at something, you need to repeat it. But what if it wasn't about repeating it, but about taking that and expanding it and making it greater? And it's like, I'm always looking to what I can expand and make greater, not about what I can repeat.
Mm.
One point somebody said, well, you should get Gunther Ranker to, which is they promoted Anthony Robbins. And it's like, you should get them to promote for you because what you have is such a great product. And I went, oh, that sounds great. So I called them up and they said, well, no problem. We would be very interested in representing you, but you have to not change anything for 5 years. That ain't gonna work. I have to change everything every 10 seconds. I cannot do 5 years of the same thing. But that's the basic point of view here, is in order to have success, you have to do the same thing for 5 years.
Mm-hmm. So if you're running a business or you're involved in the management of a business or being on the board of a business, what are some of the signs that we should be looking for that would give us an indication that the zone is in imminent possibility of collapse or has already started collapsing?
Well, it's like the first thing, if you're on a board and people say, okay, so what did we do best last year? That's an sign of distress in the future, because it's like they will ask for what the past was, the most successful thing in the past. And it's like, if you have that occur, the first thing you want to do is say, okay, you know what? One of the things we did was really good, but what could we do that we haven't chosen? Get us to the question for creating a future. And that's the thing I see most in most businesses. They don't go to what could we create in the future that would be even greater than what we created last year. They go to, well, last year we created this, so therefore we got to do that, and not necessarily greater. We got to do that good. We got to make everything as good as that. My point of view is what was good, what was great, and what could we change that would create something greater. And so it's like, to keep your zone from collapsing, always look to what the future could be that you haven't yet chosen. It's like one of the things you brought up in one of the other hangouts, Chutissa, was the thing about Steve Jobs, like killing a project that they put over $1 million into and starting over again. Friggin' brilliant.
Yeah. And he did that quite often, not just one. Like when he came back and took over Apple again, he got rid of every other product and just kept the two that should be working, that he perceived that it will work well. So he was willing to destroy and uncreate all of the product that it's not doing well, and just kept the two that went superbly well at the end.
So Gary,
yeah.
I was just going to say,
you go ahead.
You first, Mr. Douglas.
I was going to say, and a prime example of somebody who shut everything down was Hitler. I mean, it's like he was so convinced in the rightness of his point of view, his fixed point of view, that he destroyed his country in order to keep that point of view in existence. He wasn't creating for a future, he was creating for the destruction of a future, and that's what a whole lot of companies do. They create for the destruction of their future. So there you go. There's war in a nutshell. It's just another business.
From what you were saying, I'm picking up that almost the antidote to collapsing your zone is being the question and having a look at it from a point of view of a question rather than an already formed point of view of what has been in the past or what we've already invested in, or we already know the future because that's what the past has been like.
Yeah, because it's like if you function from the decisions or the judgments or the computations or the conclusions you have, it's like all you can do is have more of that show up, and it's like, is that creating the future, or is that creating from the past, which means it's like, can you really go backwards in time? Not really. So it's like if you're trying to create from a decision, a judgment, a computation, or a conclusion, you're trying to go backwards. You cannot create a possibility or a future with that. You've got to be the question and have the question in order to create the future.
We've got Chris's question too.
Yeah, I have a question regarding to bring it back to benevolent capitalism. that it's about to create sustainable future and sustainable reality. So can you
Yeah.
speak about collapsing or zone of awareness or collapsing zone of awareness in relation to creating sustainable future and sustainable reality?
Well, the thing is, if you're not willing to totally live today, if you're trying to look at your past as the source, like I talked with somebody who goes, the reason I'm so messed up is because of my bad childhood. And it's like, don't because, be the cause. You know, it's like, and so they were using the cause as their past was the cause of why they couldn't create in the present. The reality is they weren't choosing something that would create the present for the future. They were creating from I can't, not what can I do. And it's like, and that's what I see people doing in business. I see it doing in their lives. I see it doing it every day. They are looking and they collapse the zone of awareness they can have based on the past. Because it's like literally if you looked at the past as a vacuum that was sucking in the, you know, sucking up the dirt of the past, it's like your attention is going backwards, it's not going forwards. You've got to always, you know, it's like that's not creative, that's sucking up the past to prove that it's the thing that created the problem. You know, it's like all the dirt on the floor as a result of the past. Is all the dirt on the floor a result of the past, or is it a result of the unawareness people had of what they were doing?
Is this a good time to ask that question
Yes.
that Chris Hughes sent in? Do you have that question at hand that you can read out to Gary?
I do indeed. So we had a question, dear Mr. Chris Hughes, who's the also the manager of the Antique Guild, sent in a great question, and I'll just read it out. It says, where is it? Here it comes. He was watching a movie recently, and it was where they were talking about the a business that had was complaining that the large businesses coming into town were going to take away from the smaller one. He was saying that he was looking at what is it that people have decided.
You can't find it.
I can't find it.
It's basically, have a look at this.
He talked to me about this the other day. He said it was that one with Ryan and Tom Hanks, where Tom Hanks owned a big bookstore. Yeah, and he owned a little, you know, mom and pop bookstore, and the big guy was going to come in and take away all their business. And so I think it's called You've Got Mail, as I remember.
You've Got Mail, that's the one.
And so it's like that's really the thing that's occurring in the world right now. It's like everybody had the point of view that big businesses can sell for less, and so doing, they destroy the ability of the people who have to have a higher profit margin in order to stay in business. They destroy that and take it away so that that business will fail. Now that did occur. A whole lot of, you know, it's like in the book industry, there were a whole lot of people who brought in, you know, their big books and did all that. In so doing, it's like they actually changed the market. Now, what has occurred is because of that, there are huge numbers of people who couldn't get books published because if you weren't already a known author, they didn't want to publish you if they were big companies because they wanted them to know they could make profit right off the bat. They weren't interested in publishing new authors. They weren't interested in new ideas. They weren't interested in new possibilities. Now, as a result, it's like what occurred is that now the mom and pop businesses are beginning to come back because people are looking for something different. And they can't find what's different in a mainstream bookstore. But one of the things that was interesting in the Huffington Press, there was a new article called Change the Mainstream. And the thing people who are doing the same kind of stuff we're doing are actually now becoming the new mainstream because people know that change has to occur. They want change and they want something different. So they're looking for that which is different. And one of the great and awful things about the internet is it gives you the chance to find change. It gives you the chance to find things that don't exist and other things. Because of it, people have been able to publish their books themselves. They've been able to sell them over the internet. They've been able to do all kinds of things. And it's interesting because there is, like right now, what the most you see in press is not novels being published on the internet and stuff. What is being published on the internet is a whole lot of self-help books, a whole lot of things about change, possibility, and consciousness.
Yes.
What a surprise.
Mm.
But the big companies are now beginning to fail. It's like, I think in Santa Barbara, one of the biggest book chains went out of business there. They closed down. Nobody thought that would occur, but it is happening. And
look what happened
now, yeah, that's Borders. That Borders was the one that closed down. And it's like literally because they actually put up barriers to new authors and new ideas. And the publishing companies, the people who have been, major publishers for years, they're having a hard time because they will send you a note. You can send them a book, and they'll say, "We're not accepting new manuscripts at this time," which means we don't like your book. Instead of going, okay.
Can I just ask, relating to the publishing things? Like I was reading this morning, looking for example about how people collapse their zone of awareness, and I was reading how J.K. Rowling actually got rejected 12 times from 12 publishers for her book, the Harry Potter book. And I said to Steve, I wonder whether those publisher, the editor of the publisher who rejected J.K. Rowling, would be putting in place the new system or the question that they would ask before they reject the manuscript of someone. Like, would they ask different questions that allow them to see different possibility, or they just use their emotion or judgment or conclusion to reject something? And that can apply to all other business as well.
Well, it's like what I see is people who make those kind of mistakes go, well, there's no accounting for taste. They justify that they were right in their point of view. And it's like... So
they don't even look at, they don't even ask what else do they. They don't even say, okay, so should we put in the new system that allow us to see other possibility? They just go into justification about...
Yeah, well, it's like what they will do then is they will take in a lot of books that have to do with, sorcery and that kind of stuff, because that's obviously what the public wants now. But the thing is like, well, knowing what the public wants is not the same thing as looking at how well is this written, what does this create, what is, it's like, what is this doing? And it's like having had people edit my books, I noticed that most of them do not come from that place of what's this going to create, what's possible here we haven't considered, or what's this going to create in the world as if this comes out. And I'm just stunned to see that there's a greater possibility happening than what most people think is possible. And there's so much more that can occur and so much that can be created if we're willing to look from the place of what will this create as a future? That's like if you just did, if I choose to print this book, what will my life be like in 5 years? If I don't choose to publish this book, what will my life be like in 5 years? You can feel energetically how that's a contribution or not. And that's the gift that I see that's possible that most people won't choose. They won't see how their choices are actually sources of creation. And choice is a creation. Every time you choose something, it creates something else. And you got to have that awareness. If you don't have that awareness, you got snowball's chance of actually creating something. Hey, please. You look frozen.
So what are some of the key...
Oh, there you are. You're back.
We're back. Gary, what are some of the key questions that businesses could ask either at the individual level or around their senior executive level or as owners of the business? What are some of the key questions that they could start asking and being that would prevent or not not get them down that slippery slope of collapsing their zone of awareness or their zone of financial awareness?
Well, it would be that thing of, it's like if you go from, if I create this, what will the world be like in 50 years, 105, 500 years from now? It's like you begin to see, oh, it's like, okay, so I need to create a car with a big engine. No, you get to go, okay, if I create this, what's the world going to be like? And, it's like in 25, 50 years, it's like you begin to see, oh, that's not where the world's going. Because what we don't get is that we are all quantumly entangled and we're all part of the same grid of possibilities. And unless we actually choose that, we're not going to create a future that's going to be sustainable, nor one that's actually going to create a sustainable world.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. They would be amazing questions to ask around any board table or around any team of people. It's very easy for those that run a business to not even consider a question because they've already collapsed their zone. What can other people do to assist people to change their collapsed zone of awareness?
You can ask questions about the future. So what, it's like, where do you see our business in 5 years, 10 years, 50 years? See, one of the things that was interesting, it's like I read a text that said that the thing that the Japanese were doing, they were having a 500-year future predictable. They were doing in business, they were trying to create for 500 years from now. Now, if all businesses looked at it from 500 years from now, what would they have to do all the time? Change, because they would not be able to do it from the past, nor they would have to be looking to what's the future going to be like, which means they're going to have to see it. And one of the things that was interesting, a few years ago, the Japanese government started giving people money for having babies because their population had begun to go down, and they realized only if they're with their particular system of business, the only way they could continue to make profits is if they expanded their base of purchasers. They had to have a cost of state of purchasing. So they put into law some things that would create that. One was giving incentives to have children, so you'd have future buyers. Second one was you had to throw your furniture out after 5 years and get new. Third one was you couldn't have any cars that were over a certain age. And there was a fourth one, but I can't remember what it was at the time. So, it's like these things that the government put in place were the things that created a different, created the reality of the future they'd already done, which was about creating a consumption society. Now, that is a fixed point of view, and that's the thing that's going to kill them in the long run.
Right.
So coming back to when business fail because they collapse their zone. Now, the best business as the entity in itself, does it collapse its own zone, or is it the CEO and the executive team and the board are the one to collapse the business zone? Because the business in itself has consciousness. It doesn't actually collapse its own zone. The people who operate the business, right? No?
Yeah, it's the people who operate the business, and it's the people who are, it's like at every level, it's like, trickle-down theory is good to a certain extent, but the trickle-down really is that if you have people who have fixed points of view, then the next echelon down will take fixed points of view to match what's above them, and and that'll go right down to the basic level where there will be people who will collapse their zone in order to keep their job. And it's like the smartest people are the people go, something's not right about this place, I got to leave, I got to get a new job. And it's like that's the people who are willing to have the zone of awareness when they begin to realize, oh, this doesn't actually work, and I don't want to stay here because this is not this is not how I see the world. This is not the world I want to create from. What could I create from if I was seeing from my world, from my possibility. And and you need to ask, will this business last? It's like
and the key thing here is coming back to our conversation over and over again is that the business need to have benevolent, conscious leader to start off with. If you have the CEO or the board who are benevolent and conscious leader, function from benevolent and conscious leadership philosophy and way of being, they can prevent the business from collapsing their zone. And I mean, the amazing thing is that a lot of leaders are not aware of that. Wouldn't it be great if they can access the information or the mentoring that you can give to people, that the leader themselves not quite sure what to do. If they have a chance to speak to you, to speak to people like us, they'll be able to stop the falling of their business before it's too late.
Exactly. And it's like one of the things I just had a realization as you were talking, that in most businesses, it's like you need benevolent capitalism, which is, it's like most businesses have the point of view is this is our market, and they're always looking for their niche. But it's like if you do that, then you become like a horse with blinders on. You can't see anything outside of that, and so you focus on that, and you miss all these other opportunities. But you also miss how your contribution to another business will get them to contribute to you in dynamic ways. Because it's like if you helped a business that was in your neighborhood, let's say you had a company and you had 2,500 employees, and those 2,500 employees were willing to go to the market down the street to get their lunch. Would that change that market's reality?
Yeah.
Would that market be willing to support you in ways you hadn't imagined? And it's like, and you don't get that your employees, who they operate with, who they interact with, it's like, what if you used your employees as an internet, a website of your own, cobwebs of different realities to actually help create your business? Because if people were proud of who and where they work and were happy that they were working with a company that was helping other companies, would they not then invite people to contribute more to your company and to themselves? And this is what's sort of dropped out in business these days. It's become so focused on profit, so focused on markets, so focused on the niche that they provide, that they forget that there's a bigger world and a bigger possibility. And we really need to get to that place where we have the bigger world and the bigger possibility if our economy is going to be sustainable, if our world is going to be sustainable. And it's interesting because in the United States they're saying, oh, we're recovering. And I look around and I don't see much change. I see people buying houses and paying more for them and that kind of stuff. But have they really recovered? I don't think so, because the economic conditions around the country are not in that great a shape. And one of the things, like there's Detroit, Michigan, okay, is a city that's almost deserted because it was so dedicated and fixated on the car industry that when the car industry closed down, shut down, diminished, became less, it's like that whole ecology and economy ended. The whole new universe has to be created there. But we're not creating that kind of infrastructure in the United States. I find it hard to believe that we're recovering because there's too many places and too many sources of possibility that never get activated or used.
Still too many fixed points of view in existence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And from when you were talking about that, I realized that, I read a lot now. People say, oh, the CEO are just a lonely position because they're just up top. They have to get the right answer. They have to make the right decision. But what you were saying there is, if the CEO or the leader of the organization open up to receive the contribution from everyone and everything around them, then they don't feel like they're lonely at the top. they feel like they're able to create different possibility from the contribution from everything. So the key thing is willingness to receive the contribution from everyone and everything.
Loneliness comes
Absolutely.
from trying to be the answer, not being the contribution. Huh. Interesting.
And not allow people to contribute to you. You get lonely if you're not willing to let people contribute to you. You got to know that and do that and do that.
Yeah, that's the key thing, because I read a lot of articles now and they kept on saying it's lonely at the top. They're all by themselves. They have to make the right decision and they be accountable for things. But when you said that, if they are open to receive, there wouldn't be loneliness. They don't need to have the right decision or right choice. So that's so cool.
They wouldn't be at the top, but they'd be a conscious leader. And they'd be branching from benevolent capitalism, which includes everybody else, and you realize the contribution that each and every person is. I'm always grateful for the people that work with me, because I never call them working for me, because that's not what they do. They work with me to create greater possibilities. And they're always looking at how they can contribute to me, and I'm always looking at how I can contribute to them. And as a result, we're always expanding everything, all of us together. That's the benevolent capitalist and the benevolent leader would be in that position.
Okay.
So
just on this, Gary, we were talking about a little bit further down the track next year, maybe having a three-day sort of intensive workshop on benevolent capitalism. If people are interested in that, they can write to Simone at Access Consciousness or anyone at Access Consciousness just to let us know if they're interested in that. And we'll be developing that up over the next 6 to 8 months.
Yeah, and if you're interested, let us know. We'll put you on a list and we'll let you know when it's going to occur. And if we get enough interest in enough different locations, we'll do 2 or 3 of them. So there you go. We'll manage. I swear to God, we'll manage. Cope with the chaos.
Well, thank you, Mr. Douglas. Another fascinating conversation.
Indeed. Thank you so much. You guys are awesome. I just love it because every time I talk with you, I get insights. It's great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. We look forward to the next one, which will be the last one. Bye for now.
Bye for now.
Bye. Bye, everybody.